We are just 2 days away from major primaries in New York, where the city's congressional races are drawing nationwide attention. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has been hitting the trail to boost his fellow Democratic socialists as he works to expand their movement. Mamdani and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders argue that the current Democratic Party establishment does not meet the moment.
For far too long, our party has seen its job as managing decline instead of delivering material change for working people. It has seen its job as explaining why we cannot instead of showing how we can. And that old way of thinking will lose on Tuesday.
And there is something else that the American people understand, and that is that the politics and the policies of the Democratic establishment are no longer good enough.
National correspondent Bryan Llenas has the latest from New York City. Hi, Bryan.
Rich, good afternoon. Well, New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani and Senator Bernie Sanders are backing 2 Democratic socialists and 1 former Democratic socialist in 3 New York congressional House races ahead of Tuesday's primary. All 3 of these candidates are focused heavily on campaigning on Israel. In fact, these 3 candidates are attacking their progressive opponents for not being anti-Israel enough. All 3 accuse Israel of genocide and want to block U.S. military aid to the Jewish state. Here's Democratic Socialist candidate Claire Valdez, who says her opponent waited too long to accuse Israel of genocide.
So many Democrats stayed on the sidelines, they stayed quiet, or they even attacked us for protesting. What I want to see from our representatives is real moral clarity on this issue.
These Mamdani-backed candidates are also accusing their progressive opponents of accepting campaign money from AIPAC, the most influential pro-Israel lobbying group in the U.S. This week, Mamdani even called AIPAC, quote, monsters turning Americans against one another.
These monsters take many forms today. Those who would rather spend far more on political contributions than they would ever be made to pay in taxes. In AIPAC, for whom the only thing more frightening than democracy being allowed to run its course is an end to genocide and Netanyahu's wars.
Mamdani's most controversial pick is Democratic Socialist Darya-Lisa Avila-Chevalier, who's looking to unseat 5-term Democratic Congressman Adriano Espaillat. She wants to abolish prisons and is against all deportations, even for convicted criminals. In deleted tweets in 2020, she in part called former President Biden a war criminal, the U.S. an effing disgrace, and vowed to defund and abolish the police entirely. Avila-Chevalier says a win by Democratic Socialists will prove that Mamdani's win in New York wasn't a flash in the pan. Quote, I think if we can prove that wasn't a fluke, that we are building the power of Democratic Socialists here in New York, and we are doing that at a federal level, I think that will be a domino for so many other cities and states across the country. We know that socialism beats fascism. It can't just be New York. It has to be the entire country that is building on socialist power for working people. If Mamdani's Democratic Socialist candidates defeat 2 incumbent Democrats on Tuesday, it will send a very large message. It'll raise a lot of eyebrows that perhaps the future of the Democratic Party is more socialist than ever. Rich.
Bryan Llenas from New York. Bryan, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in Alex Sawyer, the Washington Times editor-at-large, and Corbin Trent, the former communications director for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, former Bernie Sanders campaign strategist, and the co-founder of Justice Democrats. Alex, we'll start with you. These are New York City primaries. They're not going to cost Democrats a seat. What is the national effect of all this, or is this just contained to a couple of House races in the city?
You know, I think it plays well in very blue areas, but not across the nation, especially when you have a Democrat candidate up against a formidable Republican. I think of the California governor's race. Steve Hilton ran a really strong competition there. And, you know, the more moderate candidate, Becerra, won. And I think that that's what we'll end up seeing across the board nationwide. But as these far-left candidates, you know, take center stage, I do think Republicans are going to use this going into the midterms and even beyond, looking at the next presidential election cycle, to paint the Democratic Party as being socialist, right? And that's something that even polls nowadays, I mean, it's overwhelmingly, I think only 30-something% of the American public support socialism. Of course, it's much higher within the Democratic Party, but I don't see it playing well nationally.
Corbin, what do you think about the national effects of this? I mean, you're working to get these types of candidates, have them get success across the country. Is this something that can find success outside of New York, Washington, D.C., Seattle?
Well, it did in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So that's exactly what the New Deal was based on. That's exactly what the TVA was based on. That's what the Interstate Highway was built with. That's what NASA was built with. It was built with a blend of government-owned and and company-operated, sometimes government-owned, government-operated entities. And that's how we built America. That's how we built the largest middle class in this nation. And the current economy that we have is not working for the overwhelming majority of Americans. I mean, people can't afford housing, they can't afford education, they can't afford childcare, they can't afford groceries. And we've tried so many ways. Go back to Obama in 2008, and then you go forward to Bernie Sanders, you go forward to Barack Obama, and then Donald Trump a couple of times. People have been trying to vote their way out of this mess for a long time, and I think they're ready. They're willing. People are willing to try different things, and what we need is better competition. Like NASA, we've basically handed the keys from NASA over to a trillionaire now, Elon Musk, the welfare king, and I think that people are saying, hey, this is not working for me. I want to try something different, and I think it will resonate. There are places like Tennessee that can be brought back into the fold of the Democratic Party if Democratic candidates and incumbents start producing results. That's the real question. Can they produce results?
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to go to Alex with here. You've got examples now of some major cities, soon Washington, D.C., but New York City for the chunk of this year after January, that have been governed by Democratic Socialists. What have the results there been, and how high are the stakes party-wide for these mayors to succeed? And have we seen a retrenchment from some of the policies there?
Yeah, I think to your point, I remember when Mamdani first went into office, they had their big snowstorm, and of course there were New Yorkers very upset about how long they were in traffic trying to get through, unable to get to work because of the snow still unplowed. So, I think that it's going to take time to see how these policies actually impact the cities, and maybe by the next presidential election cycle, that will be something Republicans hit home. I think that Corbin said something that I think is across the board, speaks to voters, especially younger voters. This American dream is still being able to buy your own house. And that's something that, I think if you look at the 70s, the average housing price was in like $20,000. And now we're looking at like $400,000 as your median. I think that there are candidates who are speaking to those core values, the affordability of housing, childcare, that will really resonate, especially because of this rise in populism across both sides. Is this push on the establishment here in D.C. saying that this hasn't worked, let's try something different. I'm just not sure if across the board, across the whole nation, that everyone's going to get on board with the term socialism. It still does not poll well.
Corbin, you've had Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, campaign against some of these candidates. Former House Financial Services Committee Chairman Barney Frank, who passed away last month, he's made this final push. In it, he tells the New York Times...
From his deathbed, basically, ironically.
Yeah, on his deathbed. The key to liberal democracy being able to come back is to get rid of the perception that we have allowed to grow, that the entire Democratic Party is committed to a series of very drastic social reconstructions that go beyond the politically acceptable. His point was basically to push change in an incremental way, probably far less aggressive than those on the left are willing to push right now. And as you mentioned, this is on his deathbed. This is like the last thing he wanted to say on planet Earth to your party to find success. So do you think it is too aggressive the way that some of these candidates have pushed change? Do they need to go slower?
No, I think actually that's the biggest problem with this party is that they, like Zohran Mamdani said in that speech, that this party's become the decline managers. They basically think that the status quo was working. I think Clinton ran that campaign, Hillary Clinton ran that campaign, Kamala Harris ran that campaign. To some degree, Joe Biden was able to escape from it because he had a bigger brand than the Democratic Party itself. But no, they keep saying that everything's great. Purchasing power's never been higher. The stock market's great. Everything is wonderful. It's like that that Lego movie, everything is wonderful, everything is awesome, but it's not. Everything is not awesome. And I think that's why people twice now have turned to Donald Trump. That's why people where I'm from have turned to Donald Trump, not because of who he was as a person or all of his actions that he took privately. They did it in spite of that because they want a better country. They want an affordable life. They want a country that's building. They want their cities fixed, right? And the Democratic Party needs to understand that they're going to have to remodel this thing real quick. It's not functional. These systems that people, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's the IRS, these systems are dysfunctional.
Okay. Alex Sawyer, Corbin Trent, thanks for joining us.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.